Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here. This is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and I have a new commander from Magic 2020. It's Kethis the Hidden Hand. Kethis the Hidden Hand is white, black, green for a legendary 3/4 elf advisor. Legendary spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and you can exile 2 legendary cards from your graveyard. Until end of turn, each legendary card in your graveyard gains, you may play this card from your graveyard. Well, we're going to be saying legendary a lot during this video because that's what Kethis is all about. It makes your legendary spells cheaper, and it gives you recursion for everything that's legendary. I love how quickly Kethis comes onto the battlefield, just costing 3 CMC, so this could be a pretty aggressive deck as well. I think one thing that makes Kethis both challenging and interesting is building around legendary spells. It seems really fun to play with this creature type and get all the legends in here, but if we really want this deck to function as well as it can, we need to enable Kethis, get things into the graveyard so that we can exile them so we can get more value from our commander. And so whenever we're including a card that's not legendary, we're going to have to pay particularly close attention to that, because we really do want a critical mass of spells that synergize with the rest of the deck. The first thing I want to do is frame this commander against a commander that is known in our format, and that's Karador Ghost Chieftain. Karador can sometimes only cost 3 CMC, can also be a 3/4, and lets you have access to your creatures in your graveyard. Now, some people may argue that Karador is just a better version of Kethis, but I disagree. I like the ability to impact the cards in your hand by reducing mana cost. I also like that you can cast many different spells in a turn from your graveyard. I also like that with Kethis you may play this card from your graveyard. That includes lands from your graveyard, and that's really powerful as well. We're going to talk about lands a little bit later. I also really like the style of legendary creatures. In fact, there's some famous legendary creatures in these colors. There are Reki, the History of Kamigawa decks, that a pack deck full of legendary so you can just draw. Super fun commander and will be a great addition to this deck. There are Captain Sisay decks. The new Captain Sisay is pretty cool, but old school Captain Sisay can search for legends or legendary cards over and over again, which will be incredibly powerful. And then the aggressive Arvad the Cursed from Dominaria can come down and just pump your whole team with a big anthem. These are legendary cards that care about other legendary cards. It really feels like we're getting a critical mass of this type of effect so that we can make a fun and synergistic deck. One other way that we can distinguish this deck from the classic Karador deck is the way that it plays. Karador grinds people out with little bits of value turn after turn after turn as they keep casting spells from their graveyard. We can make this deck far more explosive and far more aggressive. We can start attacking our opponents. Our commander comes down on 3. We can play legends like Anafenza the Foremost, Drana Liberator of Malkir, Timna the Weaver. We can even play the legendary artifact Throne of the God Pharaoh to do tons of damage. We can get even more aggressive with bigger creature. The Weatherlight can smash in for 4 and draw us a card. Traxos is basically just a 7/7 trample for 4. We don't have to. Vigilant too. That's how many historic spells we're going to be playing. We also have other equipment that can be super aggressive, like Umezawa's Jite and Blackblade Reforged, both of them very aggressive and legendary themselves. Because most legendaries are going to be creatures, this is going to be a creature-based deck, so a card like God Eternal Oketra becomes very powerful, going wide, leaning into that aggressive strategy. But if that's not what you want, that's totally fine. There are legendary creatures for any playstyle. If you want to slow the game down and make sure you're not disrupted, play Dosin the Falling Leaf, Dragonlord Dramoka, or Shalai Voice of Plenty. All of these can eventually take over the game in powerful ways. If you want to build in the redundancy that you need in more controlling decks, you can play tutors like Sidisi Undead Vizier, Thalia's Lancers, or even Time of Need. I know Time of Need isn't as good as just like Demonic Tutor, but it's very flavorful. Your commander is a great source of card advantage, but you can also use cards like Gonti, Lord of Luxury, Bolas's Citadel, and Growing Rights of Itlamok. Now it feels like we're going to have a lot of card advantage in this deck, but mana might be the weak point because we don't have a lot of 1 mana dork legendary creatures. And so we can start off by exploring the mana base. The first card that I think we all lean towards is Untai Daki, the Cloudkeeper. This legendary land lets you tap for 2. It's another ancient tomb in this deck. This is just a huge influx of mana, but there are other legendary lands that give us great value. Gaia Reach Sanitarium will let us loot, and that gives us critical cards for our graveyard, which synergize with our commander. Hall of the Bandit Lord will give something haste, and we have big aggressive creatures in this deck. And Yavimaya Hollow will protect Kethis and our other powerful legendaries. One thing we have to keep in mind is some of the color restrictions we might have with a commander like this. Kethis is only colored mana, and so playing a Gaia Reach Sanitarium on turn 1 could hurt us significantly. Kethis also reduces the generic cost of legendary spells, and that puts more weight on our colored mana sources. So let's talk about a few legendary colored mana sources. Some auto-includes are Ganjo Castle, Okina the Temple to the Grandfathers, and Shizo Death's Storehouse. All of these are legendary lands that produce the right colored mana and enter the battlefield untapped. And they all have interesting synergies with legendary creatures. These are perfect for the deck. To round out our legendary lands, we have Pendelhaven, Flagstones of Trokir, Phyrexian Tower, and Urborg Tomb to Yawgmoth. Notice all of these also enter the battlefield untapped and create colored sources. Legendary lands are going to be so good in this deck because we can easily exile them if they end up in our graveyard, letting us buy back new spells with Kethis, or we can play them with Kethis from our graveyard because Kethis reads that we can play legendary cards, not just cast spells. There are a few more legendary cards that synergize with our mana base: Azusa Lost But Seeking, Sword of the Animist, and Mox Amber. Other than that, our classic mana ramp is not really there, so that might be one of the areas where we need to branch out into non-legendary cards. Nissa Vastwood Seer is a legendary elf that can go get us a basic forest. And the Gitrog monster lets us play an additional land every single turn, although we're also sacrificing lands to keep them on the battlefield. But actually this is pretty good because we might be able to put some legendary lands into our graveyard. This could allow us to turn on Kethis' second ability or even play some of those lands from our graveyard. So the Gitrog monster could be a little bit of a legendary frog engine for this deck. The Gitrog monster is a perfect enabler to get legendary cards into our graveyard, and then maybe gives us some ability to play those back again. But we need other enablers, and there are a few legendary creatures that do it. Sidisi might put a legendary creature into the graveyard. Maybe we sacrifice a legendary creature with Phyrexian Tower, but we need more than that. A few legends can put things into the graveyard really well. God Eternal Bantu and Krav the Unredeemed can send tons of creatures into the graveyard, giving us more card draw. I don't know if we want to be sacrificing all of our really powerful legendary permanents, but I do like these cards a lot. I also really like that Krav comes along with Regna, so even though Regna doesn't exactly synergize with our deck, it's like, bam, just an instant draw card when I include these two in my commander decks. Hermit Druid will dump tons of cards into our graveyard. Satyr Wayfinder can put a bunch of them into your graveyard. Underrealm Lich can get a bunch turn after turn after turn. The brand new card Cavalier of Thorns is particularly good. 2 green for a 5/6 Elemental Knight with Reach. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put a land card from among them onto the battlefield and the rest into your graveyard. So this is ramp and the ability to put bunches of cards into your graveyard. I really like how this fits into this deck. Also, when it dies, you can exile it, and if you do, put another target card from your graveyard on top of your library, and so more interactions with graveyards, which is very solid. And we don't need this card specifically in our graveyard. You know, a lot of decks would be like, well, I don't know, maybe I don't want to exile it. But in our deck, we care about legendary creatures. Milliken might be a perfect mana dork for this deck. You can put the top card of your library into your graveyard and add a colorless to your mana pool. Nyx Weaver can put 2 into your graveyard every single upkeep. Mesmeric Orb can mill a ton, and Codex Shredder is just a simple mill 1 every single turn. And finally, there's a bunch of one-off spells that put things into the graveyard. Winding Way, Grapple with the Past, Mulch, Ransack the Lab. All of these can give you some card selection and fill up your graveyard. None of them are legendary though, and so we have to make sure that this section balances with the rest of our deck. That might need a little bit of tweaking, and it kind of depends on your build. So play around with this section and make sure that you have enough cards to move you forward, but also not so many that it gets in the way of your legendary theme. Planeswalkers can be a very powerful addition to this archetype. The Jiro with Eyes Wide Open is a Planeswalker tutor, so you can take your favorite Planeswalkers and stick them into this deck, get value, who cares if they die because you can cast them again from your graveyard. One Planeswalker that synergizes particularly well with this strategy is Liliana, because Liliana loves to put things into the graveyard and bring things back. Liliana Death's Majesty will mill you and create a zombie. Liliana The Last Hopes -2 will mill you and get you a creature back. And Liliana Dreadhorde General, well, is just a really good card, and you can draw a bunch from a very creature-heavy based strategy. There are other Planeswalkers that can fulfill other roles that we might need. Garruk Wildspeaker could be ramp in this deck. Vraska Relic Seeker could be removal and a tiny bit of ramp. Vivian Champion of the Wilds can be some flexibility with our legendary creatures and let us search. Freyalise Llanowar's Fury can be that destroy target artifact or enchantment. So if you feel like, oh man, I really wish I could include an acidic slime without messing up my theme, bam, throw in a Freyalise or a Vivian Reed. Lots of Planeswalkers can really round out this deck. One downside though is that Planeswalkers have a high converted mana cost on average. Garruk Wildspeaker is this ramp I'm talking about, but it starts at 4 CMC, and so that's something you really have to be worried about. This is also true with legendary creatures. A lot of the coolest, most powerful ones start with a high converted mana cost, and so you also want to be very wary of not having enough ramp, of having a deck that's skewing towards a higher converted mana cost that really feels clunky when it should be feeling very cool and legendary. And finally, let's talk about other ways to synergize with the graveyard. And there are a few legendary sorceries that are particularly fun. I'm just going to include all of these because they're amazing. But Primeval's Glorious Rebirth can bring every legendary creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. And just imagine if you like Hermit Druid your whole library away, and then with your commander, cast Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, bringing everything back to the battlefield. It'd be insane. Just totally crazy. All of these cards are really great value, except for maybe Kamal's Druidic Vow. I don't know, it feels like it's not quite as good as Genesis Wave. Heck, include them all. They're great flavor additions, and a lot of them synergize with the graveyard really well. There's some legendary creatures that also do a great job messing with your graveyard. Tishar, Ancestor's Apostle. Whenever you cast a historic spell, it's basically this entire deck. You can bring things from the graveyard back to the battlefield. Very powerful. Storev can get you cards back into your hand when it makes contact, and Isareth can pull cards directly out of the graveyard. We also have some legendary enchantments that can do something similar. Journey to Eternity and Whip of Erebos can get us value out of our graveyard. And then we can recur creatures over and over again with powerful legendaries like Ravos Soultender and Mirren of Clan Neltoth. I have a feeling you'd choose either one of these depending upon how your deck is built. Ravos, having an Anthem on him, is going to be very good in those aggressive decks, and Mirren of Clan Neltoth, well, needs to sort of get going. It's just a Gravedigger to begin with, and then turn after turn after turn, as you gain more experience counters, Mirren could theoretically be a powerful endgame engine. I really like Kethis the Hidden Hand because it opens up a few different strategies within a single deck. It can come down early and you can be very aggressive, reducing the casting costs of your spells and getting in tons of damage and maybe even closing out a game. But if you end up getting stopped, then this is just another value engine built onto your commander. Start casting spells from your graveyard and going for the long game. And maybe your aggressive creatures can be changed out, exiled from your graveyard, and suddenly you cast Haymaker after Haymaker. Gigantic legendary sorcery changing the dynamic of the game. I hope you enjoyed this Kethis the Hidden Hand Commander deck tech. If you did, check out the deck in the description. That'll take you over to tcgplayer.com. They're the sponsor of the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. And I'd also like to thank my patrons who are here for me all the time. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for watching. Let me know down in the comments what cool legendary creatures you're going to be pairing with Kethis the Hidden Hand. I'll see everyone really soon for more Core 2020 Commanders. Bye-bye.